Okay, so we now move to the personality assessment method. So in the previous chapter, we talked about the basic concepts that we have to understand regarding personality assessment. So I hope you still remember these things. If not, go back to the video recording, or better, go back to your readings. Okay, so we have, of course, the objective personality or objective methods of personality assessment. So, excuse. So, pag sinabi natin objective personality assessment, ito yung the usual paper and pencil na test na natitake natin, yung mga katulad ng ginawa natin for this subject. Or minsan, this can be taken with the use of the computer or with the assistance of the computer. And this is contains mostly of short answer items. And ang ginagawa dito ni assessee is to choose one response from the those which are provided. So, katulad nga nung ginawa yung mga tests, which you have designed the item format to be answered by either in a Likert form or in a dichotomous manner, such as true or false or yes or no. So, yung mga ganon. So, objective siya, kaya lang natin siya sinasabing objective is it's that because of the fact na may specific siyang construct na sinusukat, and at the same time there is an answer doon sa item or doon sa tinatanong mo, pero this type of test, kahit na sabihin natin objective siya, it does not contain one correct answer. It contains, of course, an answer that or a response that reflects the latent trait, but it doesn't mean that it's the correct answer. Okay? So, a distinct lack of objectivity is associated with the self-report. So, ito yung problema natin with the self-report na na-mention natin in the previous chapter. Kasi nga with that self-report, the tendency is pwedeng impression management, yung pagsagot niya, pang Miss Universe yung sagutan niya, which is, of course, it lacks reliability and validity and can affect the scoring and the interpretation of the test. Okay, and then, of course, we also have the projective method. So, ito naman is the person or the assessee supplies the structure to an unstructured stimuli. So, and the idea with projective kasi is that they would supply the answer na consistent doon sa kanilang unique pattern of unconscious and conscious needs, fears, desires, impulses, conflicts, and way of perceiving and responding. So, dahil nga siya projective, napo-project niya sa kung anumang stimulus na nape-perceive niya, either naririnig or nakikita in most cases, yung kanyang conscious and unconscious traits or factors na or aspects na bumubuo nung personality niya. So, when we talk about projective techniques, ito nga yung indirect methods of assessing the personality. So, one of those well-known projective techniques is, of course, the Rorschach inkblot test. So, this is form interpretation test, and it uses inkblots, and this is what we need to interpret. So, however, there is still some ongoing debate on how to precisely classify the inkblots, the Rorschach inkblots. Kahit sa 10 lang siya, ang daming arguments pa nitong 10 cards na to. And this is because the developer, Herman Rorschach, died before being able to develop a comprehensive scoring and interpretation of his tests. So, ayan. So, meron tayo nito sa ano ha, sa department. If you want to really see it, touch it, feel it, 'di ba? Smell it. Nandun lang po siya sa department. Paalam niyo lang po kay Doc Kiko. Okay. So, uh, after the entire set of the inkblot had been administered, an inquiry is conducted, and the assessor attempts to determine what features of the inkblot played a role in formulating the test taker's percept. So, actually, medyo tricky din ang pag-administer nito kasi nga, while you're writing down the answer, may two ways of administration yan eh. Parang tatanungin mo about isang card, ano yung nakikita niya, and then before going to the next card, ayan, tatanungin mo na paano niya nakita yun, ano saan niya nakita yun. Kasi may mga codings ka pang gagawin doon sa isasagot niya kung saan niya nakita yon, ano yung specific na nakita nung test taker. And the other way to administer it is yun nga, lahat ng 10 ibibigay mo muna and then babalikan mo ulit just to ask ano yung saan mo banda nakita yon, um, can you describe further yung nakita mo dito sa inkblot na to, etc. etc. For me personally, mas okay yung first one kasi nga pag tinapos mo yung 10 and then saka mo lang siya babalikan, baka kasi may mga i-add sila na hindi naman siya kasama nung or hindi siya part ng original na sagot niya. So, and that might be dangerous kasi it might confuse the assessor later on pag i-interpret niya na yung test, or it might cause more inefficiency later on in terms of scoring and interpreting the test. Okay, so third component of the test, ayan, testing the limits, which may also be included to enable the examiner to restructure the situation by asking specific questions concerning the personality functioning. So, ito yung nagawa namin yan sa mga pasyente namin in terms of the test. Usually kasi per inkblot, pwede silang kahit anong inkblot kasi or kahit anong inkblot card, as many as you can mention na kung kung 1 to sawa ang gusto mong i-mention na sagot, go for it. Wala po siya kasi nga dahil unstructured itong type ng test na to, wala kang specific na limit na hanggang dito lang isagot mo, or ito lang yung number na pwede mong isagot. However, in terms of the number of their answers, dun din namin nakikita, manic ba siya, depressed ba siya. So, may mga ganong factors na mako-consider in terms of that answers. Ayan. So, aside from what I said earlier, kasama nun, hypothesis, personality functioning are formed on the basis of variables such as content and location of the response and the time taken to respond. So, aside from the many codes that you have to you have to write down per answer, you also have to note of the time, kung gano'n niya kabilis nasagot yung isang inkblot card, or gaano katagal siyang sumagot sa isang inkblot card. Kasi may ibig sabihin din yan. So, lahat yon ino-note mo siya. Kaya nga, when you do these types of tests, attention to detail is a must. Kasi kapag hindi ka ganong person or hindi ganon yung trait mo na very keen ka sa detail or detail-oriented ka, I'm telling you, you would have a hard time to interpret or to score and interpret these types of tests. So, again, kaya nga rin siya level C. So, ito yung mga i-code mo. Some of the things that you have to code for a Rorschach protocol. So, unang-una yung location. So, let's say this whole PowerPoint or this whole page of the deck, or the PowerPoint is the inkblot card. So, location, let's say this is the inkblot, itong mga letters na to. So, tatanungin mo siya, saan mo nakita yung, kuwari, nakita niya dito ay aswang. Tatanungin mo sa kanya, saan mo nakita yung aswang? Saan dito banda? Specifically in this, in this inkblot, yung aswang. So, may mga sumasagot doon na, etong buong to, aswang yan. Or, minsan sasabihin nila, etong part lang na to yung aswang. So, may code yan. Dapat kabisado mo rin yung code. Ilalagay mo yan doon sa protocol nila. Determinants. So, paano mo nasabing aswang yan? So, yun, papaliwanag niya. Sabi niya, kasi yung hugis niya, kasi yung kulay niya, etc. etc. So, inonote mo rin yung sagot niya. Yon, may code din yon. So, for the shape, for the color, may code din siya. Content, also, may code din siya. So, since ang sagot niya ay sorry, excuse me. Since ang sagot niya ay aswang, so that's a mythical creature. So, may code ang mythical creature. And then, titingnan mo rin, popular ba yung sagot niya for that card? Kasi may mga cards na the first response is quite popular. So, let's say, for example, card number 1, ang sagot nila doon most of the time ay butterfly. So, lalagay mo pa kung P or O. So, O for original response. Ibig sabihin, hindi masyado sinasabi yung ganong sagot for that particular card. And of course, the form. In terms of how the question was answered, na paano mo nasabing aswang yan. So, lalagyan mo rin ng score yon. So, again, ang daming kailangan i-consider for the Rorschach. So, aside from this categories na iskoran mo, yan, patterns of response, recurring themes, and interrelationships among different categories are all considered in arriving at a final description of the individual from the Rorschach protocol. So, actually, mas nakikita mo yung ganong recurring theme and patterns of response sa mga clients ko na clinical kesa dun sa mga clients ko na non-clinical. Kaya nga mas, I think it's more helpful to use it with the clinical clients rather than the non-clinical clients. Personally. Okay, so dahil nga namatay si Herman Rorschach before he was able to come up with a scoring system for his test. It was John E. Exner Jr., who developed the comprehensive system for the administration, scoring, and interpretation of the Rorschach test. So, although it was really helpful, parang nagkaroon na somehow ng clarity yung Rorschach in terms of how you're going to utilize it. The psychometric properties of the test was still being debated up to now, actually. So, kaya nga may mga ibang practitioners na personally they don't use it kasi nga they don't want to be attacked in terms of the psychometric properties of the test, especially pag nakita yan sa test battery nila tapos ipapresent nila sa court. So, imbes na mahirapan pa silang sumagot na, bakit mo ginamit to, ganto. So, they would rather avoid those questions altogether or prevent themselves from being questioned about it. So, they skip using Rorschach. So, and this is because, ayun nga, that the traditional test retest, or one of our ways to measure the reliability of a test, diba? Ito nga yung mga natutunan natin in the previous chapter. Para makita mong reliable yung test, i-test mo ulit yung test taker using the same tool after a specific amount of time or a reasonable amount of time. So, pag malapit yung score niya doon sa nauna niyang score, doon sa second testing niya, then it means that the test is able to give consistency doon sa score niya, doon sa trait na gusto mong sukatan or sinusukat ng test na yon. So, So, bakit siya hindi po pwede? Dahil the effect of the familiarity in the response to the cards, and because the responses may also reflect transient states as opposed to enduring traits. So, yun yung problema doon dahil nga a big factor about Rorschach is that um, baka kasi yung mga, let's say for example, the first time you have given me Rorschach, very I was very happy, di ba? So, syempre, lahat makikita ko na, these are flowers, these are butterflies, so, lahat, kumbaga, very happy and colorful yung mga pinagsasagot ko. Pero the second time that you asked me to answer the Rorschach test, parang kaka-break lang namin ng jowa ko noon. Siya, sabi ko, ay, ano yan, parang asong iniwan sa daan, yung mga ganon. Or abandoned cat. So, kung baga, the state of the person can also affect the results. So that's why it's not appropriate to use the retest reliability for this one. So the professionals in the field still needs to come up with a better way to see the reliability of Rorschach. Okay, so next projective test na well known is of course this one, the TAT or the thematic apperception test. So this was designed by Christiana Morgan, the person in the picture, and Henry Murray. So the TAT, we also have the TAT in the department. We have brought that again if you want to see it closely or in person, you better go to Doc Kiko and ask if you can borrow it for a bit or just stay in his office to see the test. So the test is composed of 30 picture cards, and it contains a variety of scenes that present the test taker in a certain classical human situation. So, hindi naman kailangan na yung 30 cards na yun ibibigay mo. So, there are certain cards na ibibigay mo for certain sex or gender. So, may pang babae, there may pang lalaki, and then may pang mas batang babae or lalaki din. This one is Henry Murray. Okay, now what are the materials that would help you, or what will be the saka makakuha ng conclusion rather. Sorry. Sabaw na ako. Okay. So, of course, makakuha mo yung conclusion or ma-interpret mo yung test from the stories told by the examinee. So, tedious din siya kasi nga isusulat mo lahat ng ng storya niya. So kaya nga for a non-clinical subject, what we do is we just present them the story card or the storyboard, and we ask them to write down the story. Kasi for the normal population, they have certain number of words per story. I believe it's 300 if I remember correctly. So it's been a long time since I've administered this test. Siguro 2 years ago yata or a year ago. So kasi again, pag hindi mo na pa-practice na, medyo nakakalimutan mo na eh. So, ayan, babalikan mo lahat ng mga story ang sinulat niya, the words that were also used in order to make sense of what was the story about. So, pag non-clinical yung client, ang ginagawa namin, dahil nga sila yung nagsusulat nung story nila, mas nagno-note kami or we're able to note better yung kanilang test behavior and verbalization. So, yung scoring niya, fortunately, hindi naman namatay yung mga developers agad. And they were able to make a scoring and interpretation method of their test. However, a lot of people or the test users who used their test early found it quite simplistic. So, parang sa kanila, teka lang, medyo ang simple naman nito for this wide scope and very unstructured type of response sa sa test taker. So kasi ang ginawa niya lang is that ayan, ang titingnan mo would be ano yung need, um which are the determinants of behavior which arises from the individual, ano yung press, which are the determinants of the behavior arising within the environment, and ano yung tema, which is the unit of interaction between the needs and the press. So let's say for example, naka-identify si client doon sa story na itong tao na to malilate na siya, kaya siya tumatakbo. So, that's the need, 'di ba? Whereas with the press, ito yung environment, the background, let's say the background of the picture, so sasabihin niya na ano pa naman yung hindi pa naman sementado yung daan. So, ang hirap tumakbo. So, in terms of the tema, so titingnan mo you can interpret that story with the kind of a conclusion na siguro may objective siya or may goal siya na gusto niya, or the person aspires to achieve. However, the person finds a lot of challenges doon sa pag-pursue niya nung goal na yon. So, kasi nga, yun yung interaction between the needs and the press from the story that the client had given the assessor. So, the problem with TAT was that, ayun, one of those things is that it really lacks standardization and administration. Very vague siya. Actually, wala siyang specific manual. Unlike with Rorschach na, yun nga, kahit hindi natin masasabi na direct to the point yung administration niya, but we know how to administer it by asking the question, what do you see in this card? Ito kasi, in terms of anong sasabihin mo, wala kang guide. And then with the scoring, yun nga, dahil nga sobrang simplistic ng scoring na ginawa ni Murray, ang hirap niyang iskoran, and the same with the interpretation. So, ayan, just like with Rorschach, the test taker's responses may be affected by situational factors and transient internal need state. So, aside from that, different TAT cards have different stimulus pools. So, kasi nga although it's the picture cards are based on common and certain human situations, syempre it will ano ba to, incite or elicit certain emotions doon sa tao. So in terms of the consistency of answer, medyo mahirap maghanap ng consistency to sa sagot niya, 'di ba? So, yan. Okay, so how do we compare TAT derived data and self-report derived data? So, McClelland and his colleagues argued that self-report measures yielded self-attributed motives, whereas the TAT yielded implicit motives. So, yun yung nakita nila doon sa comparison nung dalawang type ng data. So, pag sinabi natin, balikan natin ulit si implicit motives. Ano ba si implicit motives? So, these are the non-conscious influence on behavior typically acquired on the basis of the experience. So, this is where the criticism about TAT is coming from. Kasi nga, aside from, yun nga, pwedeng need state nanggagaling yung sagot nila, hindi mo rin makita ano ba yung frame of reference ng sagot nila. Kasi usually with self-report, it's in the present. But with TAT, it's not really clear if it's in the present, past, or in or the future. Diba? So, medyo may mga ganong things na kailangan mo pang intindihin. Okay, so aside from Rorschach and TAT, we also have what we call the hand test. Now, the hand test, ito wala tayo nito, pati itong susunod na test. Pero with the hand test, I had been using that for several years when I was working in the clinic. So, ito yung test that consists of 9 cards with pictures of hands on them. And the 10th card is a blank card. Katulad din sa TAT na may blank card na ibibigay ka sa test taker. So, sa hand test, ang tanong mo dyan, ano sa tingin nung test taker yung ginagawa nung kamay to sa picture. So, ginagamit namin tong test na to particularly when we are doing assessment, like for example, gun license, yung papasok nga sa PNP, and also pati sa mga magti-teacher, especially kung ang tuturuan nila ay preschool or grade 1, ginagamit namin tong test na to kasi the impulsivity, very important sa amin ang level of impulsivity. My hand card that depicts that, and also the level of aggression. Yun nga yung kunakotok sa inyo, pag nag-combine yan, tapos magpupulis, ay, nako, not recommended. Pag ganon. At mahirap na. Tapos na, ano pa siya, na-validate pa siya ng mga ibang assessment tools. Ayun. And then, the other one is the Rosenwig picture frustration study. So, ito, I have only seen it in the internet. You can look it up if you want to, if you're curious about it. So, it employs cartoons depicting the frustrating situation. So, ang gagawin ni test taker dyan is to fill in the response of the cartoon na figure na frustrated. So the aim here is to see how would they respond typically in a frustrating environment or in a frustrating situation. Kasi often, yun nga, di ba, pino-project natin doon sa unassuming or let's say neutral stimulus yung sa tingin yung kumbaga ginagawa natin unconsciously, 'di ba? So yun yung idea kasi for this one. So by doing that, makikita paano ba nagre-respond tong taong to when faced with frustration. Ayan. So, responses are scored in terms of the type of reaction elicited and the direction of the aggression expressed. So, meron siyang tatlo: intro-punitive, aggression turned inward; extra-punitive, outwardly expressed; in punitive, aggression is evaded so as to avoid or gloss over the situation. So, let's say for example, yun nga, may nakita siyang ang cartoon picture is ano ba to? Traffic. Ayun, nagkaroon ng traffic confrontation about traffic. So, may dalawang characters na lumabas sa kotse nila, tas yung isa nagbabangay, tas yun, ang tanong mo na doon, ano ang gagawin nitong character na to na nakaka-receive ng harsh word from the other character. So, kung intro-punitive, sabihin niya parang sabi niya, syempre may isip niya, tanga-tanga naman, bakit kasi ganito. So, again, aggression turned inward, and then extra-punitive, pwede niyang sagutin na, papatulan niya yan, kasi nga, bakit siya sinisigaw, etc., etc. So, in punitive naman, sasabihin niya, magsasorry na lang ako, tapos, try ko ng maayos para parehas na kami makaalis at makarating sa pupuntahan namin. So, may mga ganong mga pwedeng isagot. So, aside from that, ayan, test takers' reactions are grouped into the following categories. Obstacle dominance, the response concentrates on the frustrating barrier. Ego defense, when the attention is focused on protecting the frustrated person. Need persistence, when the attention is focused on solving the frustrating problem. So, ay mga ganyan kang titingnan dun sa sagot niya. And then we also have the perceptive personality test, or the app. So this consists of 8 stimulus cards that depict recognizable people in everyday settings. Personally, I have not seen this yet. So again, you can look it over in the internet so you would know what we're talking about here. It's also very helpful for you to familiarize yourselves with other tests. Kaya nga again, I've been telling you since day 1 of this class to go and visit Doc Kiko and see the tests that the department have availed for our subject. Kasi I don't want you to graduate na hindi nyo alam kung ano itsura ni Rorschach, hindi nyo alam ano itsura ni TAT. So that's why we try to improve the curriculum, and we also tried to not tried, we lobbied a lot for buying these materials for you guys. Okay, we also have words as projective stimulus or stimuli. So we have the word association tests. Personally, I have not used this one, and I have never seen the use of this type of test. Pero ito naman, semi-structured, individually administered projective technique of personality assessment that involves presentation of a list of stimulus word. So this is entirely different from sentence completion test, ha. Kasi ang sentence completion test, so ano siya, words that form incomplete sentence. Ito kasi list of word lang. So like for example, papakita sa'yo yung card mother. So may isasagot ka doon. Ayan. The assessee is expected to respond with whatever comes to mind first upon exposure to the stimulus word. So like for example, pinakitaan ka ng card mother. Sabi mo caring. So kung dapat maraming sagot pa doon, ano pa yung mga maibabatong word mo doon sa assessor. So pagkatapos nun, ayun, i-assess niya yung response ng test taker based dun sa sinabi niya, and also other variables na may kinalaman doon sa pag-respond niya. So, ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo kanina na ibang-iba doon sa word association test. So, the sentence completion test, ito naman yung semi-structured projective technique. So, it involves the presentation of a list of words that begin a sentence. So, yan. So, the assessee's task is to respond by finishing each sentence with whatever word comes to mind. And then, the sentence completion stems may be developed for a specific use in specific setting or in specific for specific purposes. So, meron tayong mga sentence completion tests for adults, for girls and boys, kasi nga pambata siya, and meron ring workplace sentence completion test para naman sa parang projective technique siya para sa ano ba to? Industrial setting. Okay, so it might be relatively theoretical or linked closely to some theory. So if you would try and research some sentence completion test, may makikita kayo na sentence completion test na mostly personality talaga yung minimeasure. Like for example, sa sentence completion test, ang minimeasure niya is a lot of factors. how does the test taker relate to the mother, relate to the father, how is this person relates, or how does this person relate to their family, to their friends, what does this person think about themselves, about their future, about their past. So very theoretical, so to speak. Whereas yung isa naman, um, theoretical siya in a sense na yung sentence completion for boys and girls, yung sentence stem niya is naka-base doon sa developmental milestones ng test taker kasi nga pangbata yung test. Same goes for the uh, yung workplace sentence completion or sentence blank. I forgot that the the title of the test kasi nga I don't use it much since for employment purposes very straightforward yung battery of test namin. Okay, so my projective test then dinevelop si B.F. Skinner. So very surprising, 'di ba, for a behaviorist na na ang thinking is no, we don't do unconscious things here. Parang behavior is something that can be studied and measured, studied directly and measured, 'di ba? So very surprising na makikita mo siya dito. So, yung dinevelop niya, it's similar to auditory ink blots. So, the idea is parang ink blots din siya, pero auditory naman. So, he created a series of recorded sounds with much like muffled spoken vowels to which people would be instructed to associate. So, the device was called verbal summator. So, siguro may maririnig kang mga like for example, yung mga, kumbaga sa music, mga remix. Tas kung ano yung, I cannot describe it well kasi nga, I have not encountered this in school. Hindi naman sa amin pinakita to sa school. And also, I don't know anyone who uses this type of test. Kasi nga, unang-una yan, there's a little compelling evidence to show that the instrument could differentiate between members of the clinical and non-clinical group. And then, of course, we cannot put aside the figure drawings for assessment method. We have the figure drawing test wherein the assessee produces a drawing that is analyzed on the basis of its content and related variables. So the various characteristics of the drawing and the individual drawn are formally evaluated in the draw a person test. So I believe some of this were discussed by the reporters. So hopefully you have already access to sa recorded report ng mga reporters. If not, please shoot me an email or give me a chat sa GChat natin sa email. Okay? So another is the house tree person test, wherein the task of the test taker is to draw a picture of a house, a tree, and a person. And each factor here is considered to have a symbolic significance. And then we also have the kinetic family drawing. This is something that is used to help examine in relation to his or her family in the form of examining verbalizations while the drawing is being executed. Now, this type of test, the KFD, is more used with children than with adults. So, assumptions of the projective methods is that, ayan, the more ambiguous the stimuli, the more the subject reveals about their personality. Kasi nga, again, you're projecting, kumbaga, pinipiga mo yung sarili mo using this unassuming and neutral stimulus to relate to it kasi nga kailangan mo magbigay ng sagot. So, kung ano mang binigay mong sagot, ang idea nila is yun yung some factor that is linked to your personality. So the projective stimuli evoke responses that are idiosyncratic in nature. Okay, and then the ambiguous nature of a task and its results are less subject to faking. So which is again very much helpful kasi nga again with the objective personality test medyo prone siya to faking since the stimulus are quite direct. However, in terms of the criticisms, ayan, projective stimulus is only one aspect of the total stimulus situation. Kasi nga, since limited nga lang siya to one stimulus, like for example, the ink blots, hindi tayo sure na talagang na-measure niya holistically yung personality ng isang tao or nung assessee. Okay. Another is that the stimulus material may not be as ambiguous and amenable to projection as we have seen doon sa device na ginawa or sa test na ginawa ni B.F. Skinner. And some assumptions are cherished beliefs accepted without the support of research and validation. So, which is true for most cases kasi nga, like for example, Rorschach, it was done or the test was just the idea of the test came from a parlor game that the people during those time play after they have dinner parties or whatnot. So and when Herman Rorschach developed that or he constructed the test, wala namang study about it. Unlike nung, di ba, yung ginawa nyo yung mga test nyo, meron kayong pinaghugutan or meron kayong mga binasang literature before making your test. So, yun kasi yung problema dito sa mga test na to. Okay, so further criticisms in terms of the psychometric consideration. So, controlled yung variations niya in terms of the protocol length, which I can attest to kasi meron akong Rorschach ink blot test na protocol na usually isang lang siya, isang page na short band paper, yung haba ng protocol kasi meron siguro pero wala kaming uh, the standard answer sheet for Rorschach in the clinic where I used to work. Another is the inappropriate subject samples. So, yun nga, since the samples earlier on were mostly clinical patients, so some of the interpretations and scoring were based on their answers. So, which is not good since asan dito yung normal population or normal sample. Another is the inadequacy of the control group. So, again, we're talking about the clinical group. Kasi nga, at that time, mostly these tests were done, particularly with Rorschach, paisa-isa lang yung mga clients nila. So, what they can do is to use the tool that they have aside from interview with the patients that they have. And then, of course, the poor external criteria. Kasi nga, very subjective yung yung stimulus niya. So, in terms of the criterion per se, hindi mo siya talaga masusukat. Kasi nga, iba-iba yung sagot. Even when the two people who answered the same test and have the same diagnosis, they would have different answer on that same test. Okay. Now, moving on to behavioral assessment method. So, this is the third type of psychological a personality test rather that we use in the field. So, this method emphasizes on what a person does in situations rather than it is based on inferences about what attributes he or she has more globally. So, different siya in that sense from the first two types of assessment, the objective and the projective assessment. So the differences between traditional and behavioral approaches to psychological assessments have to do with key variables. Unang-una, nature of personality. Ano ba yung personality nitong taong to? Makulit pa talaga siya or ganito? What causes the behavior? So, ano ba yung nagpro-provoke ng pagkakulit niya? So, yung mga ganon. Yung mga kailangan makitang variable dito. So, methods for recording frequency and intensity of the target behavior. So, meron tayong mga specific ways to do that. We have the TLFB, which is the timeline follow back methodology. So, this is designed to use in the context of a clinical interview for the purpose of assessing alcohol abuse. So, bakit yun lang siya? Remember, yung kaninang factors, balikan natin, nature of personality and the cause of behavior. Kasi nga, hindi siya katulad ng mga previous assessment tools na, like for example, projective and objective na wide array siya or very, sa sobrang pagka-unstructured niya, ang daming possibilities na pwede mong i-measure or i-assess sa personality nung tinetest mo. Ito kasi, since you're masyadong wide ang behavior, hindi pwedeng wala kang sasabihin na ito lang i-measure ko. So, this had been, or going back to this method, this had been used to evaluate problems such as gambling, maternal smoking, and HIV risk behaviors. So, yun. And then we also have the ecological momentary assessment. So this is used to analyze the immediate antecedents of cigarette smoking. So, para makita, ano ba yung ABC nung smoking? Okay, and of course, the ever popular or the widely known behavioral observation. So, ito yung talagang ginagamit natin as one of the methods for our personality assessment. Hindi yan pwedeng mawala sa battery. We also have the self-monitoring. So, with self-monitoring, ayan, reactivity, possible changes in an assessor's behavior, thinking, and or performance that may arise in response to being assessed, observed, or evaluated. And then the analog study, this is a research investigation in which one or more variables are similar or analogous to the real variable that the investigator wishes to examine. And then the analog behavioral observations, so observations of a person in an environment designed to increase the chance that the assessor can observe targeted behaviors and interaction. So for example, yung mga marshmallow tests, ayan. So, we can look at it in an analog behavioral observation. Kasi nga, targeted behavior doon is their level of, let's say, delay gratification or impulsivity, di ba? And how do they interact pag nandun na yung, yung nag-test sa kanila or pag wala na yung nag-test sa kanila. So, yung mga ganun. We also have the situational performance measure. So this one allows the observation and evaluation of an individual under a standard set of circumstances. So usually mas apply siya sa employment or industrial setting. Kasi nga para mas makita mo yung hinahanap mong behavior or action, target behavior or action. And then the other one, the leaderless the leaderless group technique. So several people are organized into groups for the purpose of carrying out a task. As an observer records their information related to the individual group members' initiative, cooperation, leadership, and related variables. So, may mga nakikita tayong mga ganyang setup um, and then ginagrupo sila, and then tinitingnan sino yung magli-lead without telling so, mag-organize ng group, etc. etc. So, several factors yung mga tinitingnan dyan. Okay, and we also have role play. So, um, personally, when I do assessment, I never do much behavioral assessment aside from the behavioral observation. Kasi nga, um, it's a bit tedious and time consuming as compared with the objective and projective personality test. Kasi time consuming na kasi projective, maglalagay ka pa ng behavioral assessment. So, medyo ano na siya, counterproductive and hindi na siya efficient for you. Okay. So, we also have the psychophysiological methods. Ito nga yung meron ka ng mga specific tools that you would be using to assess the behavior. So, ito yung biofeedback, of course, and under that biofeedback, meron tayong plethysmograph. So, ito yung changes. Nire-record niya is changes in the volume of a body part that arise from variations in the blood supply. And then we also have the pineal plethysmograph. So this is same as the previous one. Yun nga lang, mas minimeasure niya yung blood flow to the penis. So, yung iba, yung mga ibang types of assessment, ginagawa yan. Siguro kasi nga for the need of the client, let's say for example, may mga iba kasi na, ayun, nagpapa-therapy or nagpapa-assess na hindi nila maintindihan yung sarili nila. Let's say for example, a person who have not come into terms about their sexuality. So, this might be a good tool or instrument to use. Kung saan ba mas magre-react yung kanyang penis in terms of siguro yung parang may sexual connotation na stimulus. Ayan, para lang malaman and for the client to be helped in terms of understanding better their sexuality. And then, of course, the ever famous lie detector test. However, a lot of its reliability and validity is still being debated. Actually, the results of this test is inadmissible in court. Hindi siya tinatanggap ng mga courts as an evidence. So, although ginagawa pa rin siya ng mga investigators, in terms of submitting it as an evidence in court, hindi po siya helpful. And we also have the unobtrusive measures, at telling physical trace or record. So, yung mga ganon. Okay, so medyo madaming issues din tayo with assessment. Remember, no tool is perfect talaga. Kasi nga, again, in every tool, there is an error variance. So anyway, going back to this one, isa sa mga problem with behavioral assessment is the contrast effect. So, behavior rating may be excessively positive or negative because a prior rating was excessively positive or negative, which is again true. So, kung wala, sobrang baba, pre-testing, sobrang baba, post-testing, pwedeng ma-assess as sobrang baba din. Kasi nga, parang meron kang initial idea na, ito yung threshold nung niya. Ito yung threshold nung kanyang, performance. So, a good solution for that one would be a composite judgment, wherein you try to average multiple judgment para mas makita mo better yung score niya at hindi magkaroon ng contrast effect. And then also, we have the reactivity. So, this may be or this may happen in response to being observed assessed or evaluated. So nakita natin yan sa IO. I forgot the term. May technical term yan sa IO na tumaas yung productivity nung mga employee nung nalaman nilang i-observe sila for that week. So, I forgot the term. Diyos ko, nalilimutan ko talaga. Okay. So, unlike pag hindi sila tinitingnan or walang nag-observe sa kanila, iba yung level of productivity. So, ano pa, may solution din naman siya. Of course, yung mga hidden observers or clandestine recording techniques can be used. So, for some assessment methods, ganito yung ginagamit nila. So, katulad nga ng sinabi ko nga na the marshmallow test, it uses the hidden cameras or the two-way mirror, especially when they assess the behaviors of children. Two-way mirror ang ginagawa nila. So, may makikita kayo mga ganong experiments or ganong mga tests for babies and toddlers. Again, another problem is the equipment cost and cost of training for behavioral assessor. Kasi nga, different it uses different tools na medyo sophisticated. So, katulad nga lang ng pagre-record niyan or mga hidden cameras, medyo pricey siya kasi nga the hidden camera should be able to catch all of the actions kasi nga you're after the behavior Another would be it would be meaningful or it would be better if the camera is able to also record the audio. And even the two-way mirror costs a lot, guys. I should know kasi nung naging chairperson ako, we did the budgeting kasama yan sa mga budget requests namin for the experimental psychology laboratory room. So, medyo mahal siya. And then, of course, the training for the assessors is going to be quite different from the training of the test users who uses objective and projective tests. Okay, so in totality, ayan, our profession is depended on to make diagnostic judgment. And of course, from this judgment, we have to also make intervention on the basis of very little information. So, yun yung problem, yun yung gap din minsan, especially here in the Philippines, 'di ba? Kaya nga I've been very serious in teaching you how to make a test dahil we want to expand the test development industry here in the country, and hopefully some of you will go on to that path kasi kulang na kulang talaga tayo in terms of kulang na nga yung practitioners, kulang pa yung mga tools natin na applicable for the Filipino test takers. So, another thing about this topic is that, clinical approach is more favorable than the actuarial approach in those situations where data are insufficient to formulate rules for decision making and prediction. So, mostly, contemporary practitioners do adopt the actuarial approach, which is actually very sad kasi nga, the problem with that one, since they want to save time, nako-compromise somehow, again, I'm clinically biased, so somehow nako-compromise yung the quality of the information or the decision making and prediction na naibibigay when you use the actuarial approach. Kaya nga when I was first tasked to make an employment test an employment report, or a pre-employment report of a client or several clients, it was such a struggle for me kasi I only had um, how many tests lang ba yun? Isang intelligence test, isang personality test, and isang projected test. I only had to make, or I had to make the report based on three tests. But then, since I'm clinically trained, I was used to having uh, five or more tests to use when I make the report and when I make judgment about the client. So, talagang medyo struggle siya. Pero kasi, not all the time, naintindihan ko rin naman later on na not all the time you can use the clinical approach, since there are specific purposes for the assessment. So, like for example, sa employment nga, dahil nga they need to have the client, or they need to know as fast as they can sino ba yung pwede do sa position and sino yung hindi, para madagdagan na yung productivity ng company. Hindi pwede yung clinical approach na it would take several days or weeks before finishing the report. And that's it for the personality assessment methods. So hopefully you learned a lot for today's discussion, and I'll be posting the next topic or the next chapter uh, several days from now. So hopefully you are reading as while you're reading the chapters well, or you're reading the book thoroughly, because the test again is already finished, and some of these items or some of the things that were discussed are definitely going to appear on the test.